Good morning. Everybody, welcome.
You have to go push the little button to say you know it's being recorded.
Oh,
They're always asking you to do something.
it takes a village. All right, there we go. Okay. So here we are talking about resurrection before Jesus has even gone into Jerusalem. But it's a little bit of a challenge. And I realized as I was getting ready to do this that in some ways I've always kind of avoided resurrection, not because I didn't believe in it, but because I just didn't question. I just feel like it. I pretty much take it at face value. A number of years ago now, I had a mentor, a very good Christian, and we were talking, and he said, "Well, I don't necessarily believe in the bodily resurrection. Not that he's advertising this, but that." And I said, "Well, I do, and I really don't know why I do." But that's some of the questions that we have. So while I grabbed my Bible, I thought I have a nice PowerPoint, and that's great. But I thought maybe we could start by talking about our questions about resurrection in general, or just John's version of resurrection. And I just was kind of wanted to hear what your wisdom is and what your questions are. Good morning. Any ideas?
Has
everyone been struck dumb? Questions about resurrection.
Are we going to be incensed today?
We are.
Right.
The great cloud of witnesses.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Is there a particular part of John we should be looking at to
I think it's largely chapter
catalyze our
20.
questions? Chapter
Chapter
20.
20, early on the first day of the week while it was still dark.
There might be. Are there any more of these?
Study guide?
They might be in Spanish, but Mark, you want to go?
No, that's all right. That's.
We'll check it out. We're sharing Bible.
Oh, okay.
Edna likes this version, so I'm gonna follow.
Are you looking?
Oh,
for
I
one
was
too?
thinking of these. Any
That's
more of
Right,
these?
right.
Okay, well, yeah, that we're working at the same thing.
I would-
Good idea.
So again, it's John chapter
John 20.
20. And I just kind of asked, what are our questions? What have you wondered about?
I've always taken it at faith. I've always believed in what it says too. I never questioned it.
What about you, Edna?
Well, I wasn't brought up in a church.
Mhm.
I was baptized as an infant, but then my parents were able to move away to California. So they were relieved from the necessity of going to church. But I wanted to go to church when I was a child, I think because I wanted to sing.
Yeah.
And be in the congregation with people singing, and I could read the hymns, and I liked those,
Mhm.
and I knew the prayer book. But as far as resurrection goes, well, the time when I read the Bible was when I was stuck in Western New Mexico. I was pregnant, I had a toddler, I had just moved to a tiny town. A library that was said to be extremely good. The librarian got the best mysteries that people wanted.
Mhm.
But I had been reading Balzac in
Mm-hmm.
the city, from the Chicago library. I sat down and read my Bible from beginning to end.
Mm-hmm.
So it appeared perfectly clear to me that Christianity is also Jewish, that what Jesus was teaching was the law and the prophets.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that there are a lot of different stories which are all different from each other,
Mhm.
and they're really good stories. I think I was reading about what's his name that pulled down the Philistines' temple. And killed
Samson.
3,000
Yeah,
people.
sounds-
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a good one.
And I was thinking, this is real. And what I was thinking was, this is like really about human beings. These are
Mhm.
real stories. And I think our Bible is our literature. I don't happen to believe in my bodily resurrection. I don't know. I mean, we have these different accounts
Go to
of
20.
the people
Pages
that
of
were
20.
no doubt oral and then written down,
Mhm.
and the experiences they had. And I've known other people that have had many mystical experiences over the years
Yeah.
in different cultures. I don't have very much in the way of mystical experience, and I expect to be taken back into the earth as I was, and become, I love the poem Thanatopsis that says, to be a brother to the insensible rock,
Mhm.
and to the sullen clod, which the rude swain turns with his plow and treads upon. That is dust.
Mhm.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful.
Something I read about death recently is that we really never die. We're always there. You know, we're there we're around someplace or another, you know, in some form or another. Well, a lot of what I've heard from Richard Rohr is how all of life resurrected. There was always resurrection. This Jesus resurrection wasn't the first resurrection. It's happening through life. It's a constant development. It was what keeps life going. We live and die and live and die, and you know, and there's procreation with plants and animals and human beings. That's how we were created. So we've never been away from resurrection in one form or another. So so Jesus' death isn't this weird, I mean, his resurrection wasn't a weird thing at all.
Mhm.
Interesting.
What was different about it is that both his body and his soul.
Well, thinking of this, I mean, we started out, I think your first presentation that you led was about belief. And that is a key word here also. And I'm also struck though that when you go to chapter 20, verses 8 and 9, the other disciple who reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw and believed. But it doesn't say exactly what it is that he believed. And it gets more confusing when the next verse says, for as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must
Sure.
rise from the dead.
Sure. Yeah.
So what he believes appears to be something like, oh, there's no one here. What happened to Jesus? And somehow it was easier to believe that the tomb was empty than that he must rise from the dead.
Yeah.
Is how I'm sort of parsing that. So I mean, I guess there's a kind of moment of a moment of understanding that is followed by not really grasping what it is that I guess he's supposed to grasp.
Mhm.
So I guess that cues on your question of sort of the puzzle, whatever the puzzle
It
is.
seems real,
Mhm.
the way you would feel.
Yeah, yeah.
It's interesting because those are good people, you know, how academics are and theologians, human beings. They kind of argue about it, but Saint Augustine said all the beloved disciple was believing that, oh, the tomb is empty.
Yeah.
I thought, okay, you know, it makes more sense to me, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how, yeah, yeah. Any other, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I like that openness, just that something has happened. You know, and it's a very simple and open belief, similar to the thief on the cross. You know, we deserve to be here, this guy didn't.
Mhm.
Whoever you are, just remember me.
Mhm.
You know, the simplicity of that.
Mhm.
The faith like a child, or the faith the size of a mustard seed, very
Mhm.
very simple, very open
Mhm.
type of belief.
Mhm.
I know I would look back and say, the language I would use now to describe my early understanding. I did grow up in the church with these stories and these concepts constantly,
Mhm.
but the intense, like, visceral experience to want to touch the resurrected Jesus has always been with me.
Yeah.
To be that, you know, to be like Thomas. You know, now I can say, do a little bit of projection in the past, that a lot of my intensity comes from probably my depression, my clinical depression.
Mhm.
But that doesn't cheapen the deep experience and desire and thinking, oh, once I have that, that'll be the electric that the woman touched him and she was like, I'm healed. So, yeah, so it's
Hmm.
always been a very vibrant desire and
Mhm.
sensation to want to touch him.
That's beautiful. And I think Mary Magdalene, her urge towards,
Mhm.
I would love that actually.
Yeah.
I would really love that.
Yeah. Yeah, he's like, whoa, hang on, not yet, hold on.
Yeah. Which is to another.
It's okay, just hold on.
Yeah.
I'm really on fire right now. Just hang on.
I like that. Well, if you look, these are.
Yeah, you're not ready to touch me.
Right?
You know,
Yeah.
that's it, yeah. You know, what's
Exactly.
interesting too, is he says to Mary, don't touch me yet, I haven't ascended to my Father, but when he's with everybody there in the closed room,
Yeah,
he says,
now
Thomas,
you can.
because you don't believe, because maybe that's the difference between having belief and then needing more. But you know, there's this puzzlement of all these characters in the story, you know, they're saying, you know, Mary Magdalene, oh my gosh, I mean, can you imagine what a shock that would be?
Mm.
Coming on that and just the terror, and then running back, and people saying, well, is he here? Is he not here? Where is he? Did they steal him? What's going on?
Mhm.
And then there's the puzzlement of us, in the futility of trying, this is what Sandra Schneider says, the futility of trying to picture bodily resurrection because there are no models. And then, so that's one angle. And then there's Bart Ehrman, who's an amazing scholar, but not much of a believer. But he has this whole argument about the question of even allowing the crucified to be crucified, to be buried. You know, it was usual to leave the body hanging there and let the birds and animals and all the elements do what they were going to do.
Mhm.
And so he says that was not, he kind of dismisses that out of hand. And I don't know what you guys think about that, but I think every day we run into weird things that are happening that aren't usual. So why would it not happen? That in this case, because somebody from, you know, Joseph of Arimathea said, I got a place, we'll put him, I don't know. I don't find that very convincing of him, but that's one argument. And then, but the one I don't find any puzzlement is in John. This is the text of full of belief, and the Jesus who he presents is very, after all the horrors of the crucifixion, is very certain and sure and His only question seems to be in that chapter 21, when he looks at Peter and says, do you love me? That's his question. His question isn't about him, but it's about that. Anyhow, so this Schneider says that Sandra Schneider says that we cannot know with our heads. We cannot know resurrection, but she says we must imagine, and imagine not as in pretend, but as embracing an experience. So this is the clues, and you guys probably know all these things. The tomb was empty, and there's the stolen body hypothesis that I think is even articulated. Is it Matthew? That actually, the people are saying they're going to steal a body, then they're going to tell a lie. It's fake news. It's going to be worse than before. There are arguments against that, partly because it would be very unusual for somebody in a Jewish society to go into a corpse that was unclean. That would be an issue. And other versions, we have the guards there. So would they have let anybody in? That seems unlikely, unless maybe they were.
Unless they were Chicago guards.
Could have been, you never know. And then there's this whole thing about the folded veil. Which ties into, well, if you were robbing a body, would you sit down and say, oh, no, wait, I've got to fold this up. It needs to look right. Mom might check.
There wasn't any show of violence or
It doesn't seem to be.
shenanigans, put it that way.
It doesn't seem to be. And the kind of control, honestly, can you imagine Jesus getting up and the veil was just laying over the face and then sitting and folding it before he went out? Maybe, I don't know. That's a kind of control. If our Lord did it, that's a sign of being back. I don't know, a control freak, so I may be projecting here. But
Right.
but no longer at the mercy of the soldiers and the people yelling crucify, but bringing order back into the world.
Wow, you get a lot out of that.
Well, that's one way to think about it. It's probably not the answer, but it's one possible answer. Then there's the two angels. And for this, put your hands in your book. And this was what I discovered, and I was like, oh, I never thought of that. But if you go back to the very beginning of John, see if I can do it here. Got my sticky note here, and
We go to 1.
yeah,
Oh,
beginning of John, and I read a reading that suggested that, why two angels and why sitting at the head and at the foot, and what is all that about? And this person argued, it was a Lutheran theologian, and he said it's recalling back to what Jesus talked about when he says, I think it's when Nathaniel comes in and he says, come and see. And, I've always thought this conversation with Nathaniel, which is starts around line 43. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. And then he was talking with Nathaniel, and they seem to kind of have this exchange. Jesus answered, do you believe because I told you that I saw you under a fig tree?
yeah, he's that guy.
Yeah, you will see greater things than these. And then he said to him, very truly, I tell you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. And so this reader suggested that with those angels, we are at the site of ascending to God and God descending to the earth, and that could be one way of understanding why these angels are included in the story.
And it's the motif of Jacob's ladder also.
Exactly. So that's one thing. And then of course there's the gardener, who's actually Jesus, and unrecognized because his body is glorified. And that's where wanting to touch that body kind of is attractive. What does that mean? And the divinity that was previously obscured is now apparent. And so that would be kind of something different that we experience. So those are things that say, okay, we've got all these puzzles. What do these clues tell us? Then there is Dear Mary Magdalene. And okay, you guys, I don't know if you have ever dared to do a search for images of Mary Magdalene online. I do not recommend it.
Aha,
But everybody, every single woman is gorgeous and young and looking ready for anything.
mhm.
And I thought about this, and I confess I had to reach a certain age before this ever occurred to me. How do we know she was an older, mature woman with gray hair?
And good teeth.
And
Yeah,
really, well, you know,
wow.
it's interesting, in ancient Palestine, they did have really good teeth. No sugar, and I read somewhere, and they ate a healthy diet of grain, so they actually had better teeth
Oh.
than. By the time you hit the Renaissance and the Middle Age, in the Renaissance, then our
Interesting.
teeth started rotting. So, but yeah, so,
Oh.
but so I'm propose this to you. I think there's wisdom, and we are still seekers,
Mhm.
and we still need, or maybe more, I at least need more devil.
Yeah, well, I notice as I get older, I'm seeking more because I have time to do it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
You know, it's that falling upwards
right, right.
thing, you know,
right.
you get older, you have crises in your life and you realize there's more to life than what I've been experiencing.
So she was let's see if I can move on my screen. The first reporter of this. She's the first viewer of Jesus. She's the first witness to share good news, although the beloved disciple believes first, maybe depending on what we're talking about. She is also the first to be disbelieved, to be dismissed, and to be considered an unreliable source as a woman. So, and that's another history, so that's why it's in brackets. Okay. But the great thing is she both recognizes revelation. She sees that, oh my gosh, this isn't just some gardener. This is my Lord. And she lets herself be taught. He says, don't touch me. And she doesn't touch him, at least as far as we know, and as the story tells it. So that, and because of that, theologians argue, this allows the revelation to continue, the process to continue to go, which will begin in the spread. Why Jesus says, I'm puzzled by this, so if you guys have heard any theories on this. I have not yet ascended to my Father. That's what the reason the text gives for saying, don't touch me. Is that a concern with uncleanliness? This is not a corpse,
No,
right? This is a, what do you
we
think?
go overboard about our ideas about what the Jews thought was unclean
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
on. And yes, handling a corpse is something special, but
Mhm,
this is not
Right.
about handling a corpse. This is about meeting Jesus.
Right, yeah. So what do you think?
I wonder where that theory of going to hell came from. I wonder if it's part of that. Where was he?
Oh, right, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
Mhm,
no, and what I understand by that reference is that he came to save everyone, the dead, as well as those people who are
Jesus'
living.
descent into hell. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the
Mhm,
heroine,
mhm.
yeah. Yeah,
mhm.
yeah.
Jesus says to her, I have not yet ascended. And there's a note here.
Yeah, he was descended there.
Mhm.
Jesus' ascent and return to the Father enables the disciples to share fully in his relationship with God. What is true of Jesus' relationship with God, my Father, my God, is now true of the disciples' relationship with God, your Father, your God. And there's references to some of the passages here in John.
Mhm,
Those who believe have become children of God.
mhm.
Well, I've got two minds then.
Mhm.
One is gonna be the book, the gospel as we have it. You can build a theology on it. So it seems as if, like you said, he said, don't touch me. I need to go to the Father. And then later on, people touch him and he's okay with it.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So you have to figure, so narratively, you have to say what, so is it something to do with the quality of Mary and something to do with the quality of Thomas?
Mhm.
Sure. Or is there an up and down that Jesus did?
Well,
Yeah, did he?
it says, right,
Yeah.
it is here in the words of Jesus, which will be in red in your red letter Bible. I have
Yeah.
not yet ascended.
Right. Yeah, so if but if the touching part. Yeah, and that's what I mean, that there's needs to be something there, because at the end, right, this is where, why are you looking up there? The same Jesus will come back in the same way.
Mhm.
Is that what this gospel is?
That's the angels, right? But that's what
This is the disciple, let's see.
no.
No,
in this
that's
one.
15.
Yeah.
Jesus appeared to the disciples as he was raised from the dead. So that's a weird. This is now the third time when they finished breakfast. Yeah, then there's to love me.
Mhm.
Truly I say to you, when you grow old, you will stretch out your hand, someone else will fasten a belt around you. After this, he said, follow me.
Mhm.
Uh-oh,
What?
there's no ascension.
Well,
You must be at the end of John.
Yeah,
We are talking.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, not,
so it's implied,
yeah, it's gonna make, yeah,
but there's no ascent, yeah,
yeah.
there's no ascension in there.
But isn't it in John where he eats the bread or the fish with the?
Yeah, he does, that's like
He
the
does that.
70 days, the amount of days.
Sorry, I'm
he's-
late.
No, it's
No.
good. Yeah, he is hanging
You
around.
had to wave your prawns around, didn't you?
I had to stash them in various places. And they're still in the sermon, just so you know.
Yeah, okay.
George is still preaching.
Mm,
Oh.
okay.
I know,
All right.
I know. And I'm sitting here thinking, I don't have altar duty this week, but I'm gonna have to help because there won't be enough time to
Oh, wow.
Oh, right, to reset, yeah.
to
I'm
reset.
gonna have to watch the YouTube and see how this comes out, because I'm.
Oh.
I'm the entire seat. I gotta go back to fire though.
Oh, okay,
Oh, that's
yeah.
Seth just went downstairs, so you're not, officially, you're not late yet. He
Right.
just went downstairs with his
All right.
puppy.
All right.
Is that your book? We'll put it away.
Yeah, I'll.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm flummoxed.
well,
That's why you do Bible study.
yeah, and
And that's what this is.
That's the point of it.
Yeah.
carrying questions and they don't all have answers, and I guess that's mystery.
There's no temptation here either, because what I was gonna say is the two angels referred to the angels who ministered to Jesus after his temptation. But there's no
Oh, that's
temptation in
interesting.
John.
Yeah.
No.
that would be- But that's where you've got the text, which is has a certain thing that it wants to accomplish. It wants to help you believe.
Right,
But then it's against the backdrop of all these stories that are circulating orally. And so I think, well, let's keep going and let's see what happens, and I'll share with you what people have said and see what you think. But the great thing about, before we leave Mary Magdalene, thematically, her announcement ties into the proclamation uttered by the devastated Martha. I believe you are the Son of God, the one who is coming into the world. So there's that, recognizing who he is. And then there is the implicit belief of Mary, the mother of Jesus, demanding, and I think that's what she does. That Jesus fixed the wine problem
Yeah.
at the
Oh.
wedding, just, you know, and I think that's mom saying, you know, why are you talking back to me?
Yeah, right.
You know, based on what Josh said,
Mhm.
women were to be seen and not heard, or not even seen and not heard. It's interesting how important they are in all of the gospels.
Mhm.
And they were in the Old Testament too. So
Mhm.
maybe it's a Jewish carry-on that to include them.
I think it's
In
more
the
of a
story.
medieval view of women, the medieval monks and the religious. People felt that women had no place other than to have children. And I think when they were finalizing the Bible, when was it? When they were
closing the
finalizing,
canon,
well, was that what it's called?
200, sure.
I was gonna say 300, but I didn't know.
200.
I think they had no problem putting women in the background. I
Oh.
know the
Okay,
Jewish
gotcha.
scriptures, I'm not familiar with how they were assembled. But,
You guys might be interested.
Well, there's Hannah and Rebecca and Ruth, you know, so.
Yeah.
oh, there's a strong woman
Yeah.
story.
Deborah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Amy Jill Levine makes the argument about women that they are much more prominent in Jewish society than we give them credit for.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
that, like,
we
when you
pretend as
mention
though
of-
they're like the
Yeah,
Muslim women
and
that are
it's
made
not.
to stay in.
It's not.
Right.
It's
but
not
they're
the
not.
same.
But the
No.
readings that then accrued on them from the later ages, which had a
Yeah.
not quite so open-hearted view towards
Yeah.
women.
Yeah.
They kind of
That's
put them in a
where-
box.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, yeah. But you might be interested in reading that. She's got an interesting idea.
What?
Well, remember, you have to read it.
What are you talking about?
So our,
Coming attraction.
our book group, it last, well, 2 months ago, we did the book called The Sabbath. It was written 50 years ago by a Jewish rabbi.
Uh-huh.
But what was interesting about the Sabbath, which is the one Jewish holiday, not holiday, well, could you call it a holiday, but day of rest that we all know about, is the primary responsibility for that women, or for that week, or that day, rest on the women. They prefer that they prepare the meal the day before.
Yeah.
They light the candles for that Sabbath
Mhm, mhm.
supper, and it was a wonderful chapter on how it was the woman of the household who led that whole
Who enabled
structure.
it.
Mhm.
Well,
Right.
no, I meant even now,
Yeah.
it's the women.
Yes, yes,
The guys
yes, it
just
is.
show up for dinner,
Right, yeah.
but
well,
it's the women who
Yeah.
and they
Do all
do they
the
say
work,
the prayers as well? And the women, are they the ones that lead the prayers for the Sabbath meal? Do you know?
I'm
Do
not
you
really
remember?
acquainted with how people do it much.
Well, I'm trying to
And of
remember
course,
from
my
this book.
grandchild,
Yeah.
Mhm.
who is the one who's practicing the Sabbath in our family.
Yeah.
Uses the pronouns them and they.
Okay.
And I know that like,
Ah.
Reformed is gonna have a different practice in modern Orthodox, so the modern Orthodox.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Rabbi was
Well,
saying it's still.
Yeah, this
would-
book
would be
was
saying
written
that.
way before them and they.
Well,
I mean, them and
Rabbi,
they
are
may have
you
been
acquainted
around,
with
but it
Cassius
was, yeah.
John?
Yes, yeah, he marched with King and,
Yeah.
but no, I mean, who reads the
who did
prayers
it,
on the
yeah.
Sabbath?
Mhm.
Yeah,
But my hero is Rabbi Hirsch, who made Chicago Sinai Congregation
yes,
have
Yeah.
its meetings, its public and open gathering celebration on Sundays, because that was the day when his Jewish congregation could leave their businesses and
Right.
work
Right.
and still earn
Yeah.
a living.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Far more flexible than perhaps Christianity, the Jewish tradition, the Jewish religion.
They always are, they have the most wonderful capacity to take like we're doing here in city and talk it over and figure out, is this what it means? No, maybe this is what it means. And where do we see God in this? Do we see God in this? What is it? And it's just, it's not seen as squabbling.
Yeah, the
seen
way
as-
Talmud is
Yeah.
it says Rabbi so-and-so says this,
Right.
Rabbi so-and-so says this. There is no argument about it, it's just different statements.
Right, I like that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find truth.
And then you read it and you talk about it
Mhm.
in groups, that's.
and there's
all
lots of
this
different
study.
traditions or movements of thoughts, and I would suggest that there are still some groups that are a lot more stringent and exclusive and do
Mhm.
argue more. Especially about when there was no, like, when there was a growing communities in America, but they didn't have kind of a strong location to whom to say how do we practice, how do we adapt, like you would in Europe. Anyway, but that also there's lots of other strains, lots of other sects that grew up just like we did, and so there's no monolith either.
Mhm.
But I think where Edna's going is there's also no condemnation of the other practice. I mean, nobody's going to condemn that group of Jews because they're practicing Sabbath their way. Everybody's
I would guess somewhere there are, but.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's just
Maybe.
human
Yeah.
nature.
Yeah, the
Maybe
Orthodoxy
tonight.
has is very exclusive. isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Well-
like human nature is so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there tends to be, there's an openness to revelation. Then there's this is I was thinking about, okay, and you guys might have other ideas. What's the promise? Okay, so we talked about puzzlement, the promise. I'm going to my father and your father, and this is what he tells her to say to, I'm gonna say the guys, but I think it's much wider than that. I'm going to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. And I've always found that wonderfully, it's like a hug. It's like, we are all in this. But then as I was sitting there, I got another question. I said, wasn't Jesus God, and can you be your own God? Don't go anywhere with that. I'm just putting it up there because I thought, man, you've been thinking about this too long and I'll worry about that tomorrow, like Scarlett O'Hara. But you know, it's just kind of like, I don't know. The big battle though, among theologians is, and I'm sorry that picture, this lineup is there, but N.T. Wright, I believe it's Anglican. He's I've listened to him. He's very cerebral, very, very smart man. And the big battle. And on the other side is Marcus Bohr.
Mhm.
And I saw him at a talk up in the University of Washington. And he's no longer with us, but he was the most pastoral man, just in speaking. So these
He's
are,
a theologian.
yeah.
How is his last name spelled?
Borg, B-O-R-G.
Oh,
He was part of the Jesus seminar. The ones who said, okay, how many words here actually really can
Mhm.
we say? So, but they have two different views. So N.T. Wright says, no, it's a bodily resurrection. It is physical. You can't get away from it. And that's part of what Paul is saying when he said, if there has been no resurrection, then we are the most
What-
bereft of
yeah.
people.
Mhm.
You know, Borg said, yes, I believe in resurrection. And I believe in resurrection through people, but he says not the physical body.
Does he say something about like a particular persona or consciousness?
Yeah, it's more like that. It's more like that in the belief of the disciples, there is our Lord. And our Lord is when we minister to each other, there is our Lord. And that is, I mean, he's very readable, and he wrote a really good book that I often read during Holy Week every year. I think it's the last days of Christ or something.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting because it's got a lot of history in it.
The one thing I'd be
Mhm.
concerned about with that is the dissolution of the self. And
Mhm,
I think especially when we learn
Mhm.
about
mhm,
psychology
Mhm.
and codependency or like
Mhm.
Bowen family systems, the
Mhm.
dissolution of the self into
Mhm,
others
mhm.
is a negative
Yeah.
impact.
And I'm not sure he
That
would
just-
do that, but
so-
that's a good
So,
question.
right, but I
Mhm.
feel that that's almost inevitable if we see,
Mhm.
you know, it's different to say there is a Jesus that you can touch. We don't, he's
Mhm.
invisible right now,
Right, right.
but
right.
but you can also encounter God through other people. Well, you can have both,
These are-
but in order to,
Oh,
but to
come
say there is now no more of this person,
Mhm.
I'm nervous about that.
Yeah, yeah.
these were-
Similar to how I think that the Trinity with
Yeah.
distinctive persons that are in interrelation, but there's
Mhm.
no mixture or dissolution.
Right,
That
yeah.
also maintains whether that's in either in two people, whether it's polyamorous or whether it's
Mhm.
any other fact that's maintaining the self. The person is distinctive, and that's very important to not become codependent.
Mhm.
And if theology, so I'm
Mhm.
arguing from like, again, from a pastoral theological
Mhm,
perspective. And then my other pushback pretty quickly is, and I know the creeds came later, but that Greek word is sarxis, that means flesh.
Yeah, yeah.
That doesn't mean the Greek Platonic persona that is a face that hides the self. So I like his point.
Mhm.
I don't agree.
Something you guys might want to check out. I've got it here. I don't have it. Well, maybe I can make a copy. But there's a not real long video. These guys knew each other. They were good friends from whenever. And there's a short, it's about 6 minutes of them both talking about this on YouTube.
Yeah.
So I
Oh.
have the address, so you might be interested in just checking that out.
please, I'm ready.
Yeah. Oh.
Right.
No, I'll send it to you
I
guys.
forget
But,
if I don't ask.
But
Right,
yeah,
yep.
so it's
Um,
an interesting question. Now Sandra Schneider's is, she says, this is how we should understand it. Okay. Now, she says, first of all, what we do not believe, and I think we've already raised some of these things. We do not believe it is just resuscitation like Lazarus, which I think as a child, I was kind of like, oh, he just came back and
Right.
there he is. And it's
Oh, we're
great.
talking on the resurrection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
mhm. We do not believe it is reincarnation or transmigration. Okay. We do not believe it is some kind of half-life, like in Sheol or Hades or the Elysian fields. You know, that's not.
Purgatory.
Yeah.
You forgot purgatory.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably should be, yeah. Jesus, and it's not also, and I think this is a very, I don't want to use temptation because I don't want to judge it, but I do think the idea that Jesus lives on in the cause, like
Mhm.
Martin Luther King continues because of his good works that he helped us to. That is not necessarily the way to understand it, and not transformation into cosmic energy. And actually, that's why I've got that picture.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, that's the one that appeals to me. That's the one
Yes.
where I tend to go because
Yes.
the beauty and the amazement and
Yes.
so, but she says no,
It's
so I'm
a-
thinking about it.
It's a smaller Big Bang, or it's a
Right.
bigger Big Bang.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
the biggest Big Bang,
Yeah.
you know, it's like the black hole was the crucifixion and the terrible passion swallowing everything up. But then,
Yeah. The return.
Wow.
Because you do.
Oh, yeah,
An
right.
image. That is a
Right.
good,
Yeah.
that's a great image, even
Yeah.
though,
yeah.
Thank you.
yeah.
Because you do have to, even if you take these, you do still have to then, if you're gonna make kind of a comprehensive argument, a logical argument, you do have to include things like, well, ashes to ashes then.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of okay into the cosmic energy as long as it's kind of like a divine recreation of the flesh.
And it's personal. I mean, your
Yes.
point about that it is, and
Yes.
that I think even Borg would agree with you, that
Yeah,
it is personal it is that person.
yeah.
It's Jesus
That bottom.
energy, yeah.
Yeah, and
Because for
she,
general resurrection, we're still gonna kind of argue that all the atoms and everything that our body is made of, like kind of like a naturalistic pantheism,
Mhm.
that it's a reforming. So we need to rebuild. Okay,
This is what she says, and I think this is what you're saying too. Jesus, who really lived in first century Palestine and died on the cross,
Yeah.
is alive in God with the full integrity of his humanity as a bodily person, and is interactive through us, and I would say maybe with us, now and
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah.
So that is also, I think that's kind of.
Interactive through us.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
And that goes back to what I was always told, bodily resurrection, heaven is a physical place. Because
Interesting.
he's living in his
it's gonna be
body.
somewhere,
And the
right?
Well,
kingdom
he's
is now.
in
Yeah.
his body.
Right, or otherwise
Now-
he's like
now.
floating off in the Crab Nebula, maybe? I mean, that's a cool idea.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'd like to see out there.
Mhm.
Well, that's what the nuns always told us. It's a real place. We just don't know where it is.
It's kind of a different plane of existence.
Well, I
Possible.
think it's
Yeah.
our job to try to create
Yeah.
as much of heaven
Yes.
as we are.
Yes,
Heaven on earth
Thy
is
kingdom
what
come.
he's said
Yes.
throughout his ministry.
Thy kingdom come.
Kingdom
with
of
the
heaven.
Holy-
yeah, is at
Mm.
hand,
Here,
is
right here,
within you,
yeah.
is upon you, is, yeah, yep,
So she says this makes personal relationship possible because it is the friendship of, the people. We are baptized and we live and we act in persona Christi. And here's where she's pushing. She's of course a Catholic nun. We do not act in persona Christi by appointment or by ordination.
Would
We
you
are
tell me
all
what in persona Christi means?
in the person of Christ?
Okay.
Yeah.
it's also a theological category referring to sacramental licensure. So the person.
Oh, that's
right?
why you have that,
Yeah.
That's why she's
You've got the
she's pushing back
explanation
against
back
it.
there.
Okay.
I'd be interested though, if she would still maintain some kind of office or function of particular in persona Christi. Because do you know if she would say that anybody can provide any of the sacraments? So if it's a
She might.
functionary.
She might.
Oh, she
I don't
does?
know.
Okay, she might, yeah.
And so you got all this from her books?
Yeah, her books and I actually, most of this, some of what I was learning is from a interview or a program she did last year that's also in the,
Oh,
and so you can see her live and she talks about this and I just was listening and taking notes, and I found it fairly compelling.
Her name is Sandra Schneider.
Schneider's. Mhm. No, she's Catholic, and of course it was. I can tell my roots in that church are still, I mean, I was
Yeah.
old when I left.
I'm always interested in Catholics
yeah,
that think a
so-
little differently.
But I think all of these people, everybody together with all their different views, that kind of helped us get the full richness of the.
Was she a nun?
Yes.
Was she, was
Mhm,
she?
she still
That's
is,
why
yeah,
she's
still-
thinking differently, because.
She's pushing back, yeah.
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 I went to a convent boarding school in London. It was a mother
Mhm.
house for the Franciscans. One order of the Franciscan nuns.
Mhm.
Anyway, I met two incredibly fabulous,
Mhm.
strong women who would
Mhm.
never tell me that they should have been a priest, but they were examples of
Mhm.
why women go into the
Mhm.
convent.
That is a place for women to have power, and was in the
Mhm.
Middle Ages as well.
Yeah,
they
well, this
have
was
it
in the
those kind of things.
60s, and
Yeah,
even
yeah.
then,
Yeah, my mom was
Right.
in.
Well, it was a different reason in the Middle Ages.
It's
You,
just pretty tough.
yeah.
I don't have to bear children and work yourself to death.
Right, yeah, there's a
Yeah, it
level of
was
freedom,
true,
there's
yeah,
a
there was,
scholarship.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I know our nuns went into the Belgian Congo, so I wouldn't say that it
That's
was,
intense.
it was not a
I'm
safe
talking
life.
Middle Ages, my
Yeah.
dear.
Yeah.
A little different now. Now you really have to work.
But it's almost, you could choose that life if you thought you
Yeah.
had a calling. then
Yeah.
at
It
least
wasn't
it's a
because
still
you,
work.
otherwise you were going to be married
Yeah,
off to somebody,
or
yeah,
something.
yeah.
Mhm. So as we act towards the baptized, we act towards Jesus.
Mhm.
Of course, I think of this, and I think as we act towards all of our fellow humans, we act towards Jesus. So I would extend that beyond just baptized, but Jesus
Uh-huh.
transformed by resurrection. This is what she said, glorified, not bound by the exclusive limitations. And I put boundaries, you can't see it there, but boundaries, and that's my word, of the body, like age, gender, race, time, etc. Okay, but also not pure spirit.
Mhm.
This matters.
Mhm.
This matters.
Mhm.
Matter, I guess that's kind of a
Matter,
pun, isn't
matter.
it? But anyway, so he is fully and personally identified with the body. And she says the only person to have ever gone through resurrection. So anything else was resuscitation, and I still is.
There's also a wonderful art
Mhm.
history book called The
Mhm.
Sexuality of Christ,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
written by an
Mhm.
art historian named
Mhm.
Leo Steinberg.
Mhm.
No, Steinberg is wrong.
Yeah, look at you.
In Renaissance art,
Mm,
and
mhm,
it has a considerable text
mhm,
taken from Renaissance preaching
mhm.
on the date that the Roman Church nowadays dedicates solely to Mary, but used to be called circumcision of Christ. And
Yeah.
is 8
Oh,
days
yeah.
after.
Oh, I didn't
Christmas.
know they changed that.
Yeah, Leo Steinberg, The Sexuality of Christ in Renaissance Art and in modern oblivion.
Yes.
Fascinating. Yeah, the sexuality, the gender presentation or gender expression of Christ. Yeah.
Well, I have to tell you that this session was started with a picture of an older woman, maybe 50s, with great teeth. Oh, and she said, and it was presented that why not a woman being older? Why does it have to be a young?
For Mary Magdalene.
You
Yeah.
know,
Oh.
why does she have to be?
Oh, and I saw the picture of Mary Magdalene, and I
That's
thought,
what that was.
oh,
Yeah,
that's
that's
interesting.
not how we see her. is it?
No, it's
Yeah.
not.
It kind of blows Jesus Christ Superstar off.
It does. But too, I think if we are gonna have a fully risen, resurrected body, our sexuality is part of that, and our healthy love for each other. I mean that, so if I've read, who is it? I can't remember her name, brain fog from post-COVID, but But there are arguments about Mary Magdalene and Jesus having been in love with each other. And I listened to the book, and at a certain point I got fed up and stopped. I think that was more about the book than the idea. But how can we presume that in the fullness of his humanity, he did not love in the fullness of the way that we love each other?
Mhm.
And so I think we need to open our hearts to that. And that's part of his wonder too, and his daring to come down and take on this flesh that we're talking about rising. Because it comes, what do you think, Josh?
I think that I agree, and
Mhm,
I like that that there's ambiguity in the text,
mhm.
because it presents the same thing with the disciple who Jesus loved.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and it can also argue for the holiness of being
So,
asexual.
or be, yeah.
Yeah, you just have no interest. Or people who are romantic, who are like they're like pan romantic. They have this openness and this desire to be connect, but it's never actually moves into like an erotic nature.
Right.
Or that Eros stays emotional and spirit. So it's like that whole, that's that spectrum then
Mhm.
that you can get in seeing a little bit of yourself or a little bit of somebody else
Mhm.
within the same narrative, because it's not clear.
Yeah.
So Jesus was 30, they think
They say
30.
30.
So I'm thinking in that culture, there are decades where he was doing something else besides preaching. So that's what we don't know about.
Mhm.
I mean, there have been books written.
Yeah, there's interesting,
Argument.
and there are the gospels that have not been canonized.
Well,
Um,
Bill told me about a book called Zealot,
Yeah,
which kind of
Oh, that's
carries
right.
a lot
I
of
read that book.
a
That's a good
lot of
book.
mythology
It's interesting.
about Jesus' life and what we read in the gospel apart completely, because this couldn't happen.
Mhm.
You know, these people were such and such, and they could never have done this, and Nazareth. There wasn't any such place as Nazareth that he could find, except it was mentioned in the scriptures here.
Mhm.
And
I have a little pushback with Aslan's methodology, but I am convinced about especially the zealot aspect of
Yeah.
Jesus that he presents. And it's also, I think he's got a great argument.
yeah,
Yeah,
well,
Well, wasn't there disappointment in that Jesus was not the
right.
Yeah,
fighting
they
the
were
Romans?
waiting
I mean,
for
there was a
him.
whole group
Oh,
that
yeah.
thought he was
Yeah.
gonna be the
There
one
was a lot
leading.
of disappointment, yeah.
Yeah.
and gospels were written for a particular audience
Right,
too.
right, yeah.
And they were to, so they kind of brought in Gentiles as their focus, or Jews solely as their focus. So, we had a whole other thing going.
Yeah. What does it mean that we're kind of a community and our person is gone?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Don't trip on the wire.
Right, watch yourself.
Don't trip on the wire.
It's under a
Okay.
thing.
Behind me.
Yeah.
I promise not to.
Yeah, what does it mean? He's gone, right? That's the tragedy, and that everybody can identify somewhat with Golgotha, with the tomb, is where he's gone. So
Yeah.
these books are about that.
Yeah, and the other thing that's interesting about this, though, this is, what do you guys think of this? This is, she says, the resurrection.
I'm in the wrong place.
Are you?
I can't see her. I'm going over.
That we can only know this by revelation. We can only know it by revelation, which is God's self-disclosure. But we have no control over revelation. We have no independent access to revelation.
Mhm.
Only God's action makes it happen in our lives. Only God knows what is revelation and what is mere human theory or opinion. And revelation is, quote, strictly necessary to understand the idea of Trinity, to understand the idea of incarnation, and to understand resurrection. And she makes that, and gets pretty deep, and again, my post-COVID brain kind of got foggy here, but I share it with you and you can clarify. Revelation allows us to see the unseen. It's not a hallucination. And the example, she says, there's a broom in the closet. I don't see it, but it is there. It really is there. And that with resurrection, we haven't seen it, but that doesn't mean it isn't there.
Mhm.
And it is not a way of passing on information. She says it's making the invisible visible and the unknown known. And in a nutshell, she draws a distinction between Aristotelian knowledge, and I know some of you are much better in philosophy than I am, but where the subject, the knower, is kind of the center. And if I'm the subject, I use my senses to examine the object, okay, that which is known. And truth means there's an adequate match between the object and the mind, okay? But the center is the knower. And she says, and she has a big discussion on this if you're interested.
Phenomenology.
Yeah, phenomenology. And my husband, who did take in graduate school, did take he read it. Oh yeah, and then he was talking about
He studied phenomenology?
he studied American literature, but he did take a philosophy course,
Okay.
a graduate philosophy course. So phenomenology, it's not me. It's what is out there that comes to me. Okay, and this is way oversimplified. But the resurrection shines forth, it appears, it gives of itself, and it arises in our experience. Revelation is experience. And it's something that appears regardless of objective, in quotation marks, reality. So there are poor phenomena which do not have great meaning, okay, in our experience of it, or as a people, as an individual. But rich phenomena, she argued, and this, in citing this philosopher, overflows. It's like the cup that runneth over. It's the meanings and the ideas. And she also says we can accept witness, like Mary Magdalene comes back and says,
I saw him.
yeah, yeah. And so we can say that, but that's not the same thing as revelation. That's just an ascent. Oh, okay. But revelation happens to you and you and you and you and you and you.
Personally, you're talking
It
about.
is. You cannot
experience
experience revelation through somebody else. You experience it.
Would you would you compare that with people, when you finally accept Jesus, I mean, whatever age you were, I was 5, just so you know. But that, would you say that's kind of what it is? This is something that is in you and cannot ever be changed. It cannot be changed. So that's what you're talking
It's
about.
kind of in you, but through, it's not, you put it there. It came
No.
from this
Yeah,
power.
Yeah,
But
knocking
Schneider-
you shall, and you knock. I'm knocking on your door, you can answer it. And
Yeah.
that's how I feel. That's how I feel it is.
But she's really strict about this, and I think she's very right. She does not mean that. This is not about the saved and the unsaved. Okay,
The what?
the saved and the
Oh,
unsaved.
Oh, yeah, right.
Okay, it's not,
Yeah.
oh, well, we are the elect, right?
Yeah,
And everybody else is damned because.
we
and
all
then-
have an
that's-
opportunity.
You've got to get out and do things and have relationships with people.
Yeah, yeah.
I
you
know, I
can't just-
call it
yeah,
higher power.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really what we draw on,
Mhm.
always with us, but we have to be aware of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think our uniqueness as individual human beings affects how the phenomenon affects us, how God reaches out to us. And that's why some people have very different experiences. Many people will say, I believe in resurrection, but they don't all describe it the same way. And I think it's a lesson for us to say, how do I take it in and how do I hold it? You cannot prove or disprove revelation. Okay? It's not illogical. That's at least what she said. And she says that all those signs we've been reading about and listening to, those are symbolic revelation. But John's gospel itself is an expression of that which is present. So it provides revelation. The signs are just pointers. Okay. The symbol is a manifestation of something that is here among us here, that's active and present. The sign merely points. So I'm going to show you these signs so that you may believe. Okay, but the revelation, that's that's different.
I'm glad you went into the concept of the relationship between the sign and the signified, I think is very useful.
Mhm,
Or epistemology, how we know things.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah, and logic, like you can say, the revelation, the internal logic, it has an internal logic, which is one of the things that pulls us into it because of the beauty of the internal logic.
Mhm.
But it can't, yeah, it's not the things, the claims that it makes. You can decide about
Mhm.
in regards to the empirical world, but it's not, but there's still that distance. There's still a distance between it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Hmm.
Mhm. So this is where we come back to the folded veil. And
Oh,
Schneider
nice.
at least argues, this is not me, this is her, she gets all the credit. I'd say she calls that as a symbol. That's not a sign. That's a symbol that recalls the veil of Moses. Do you guys remember that story? His
Yeah.
face shone so
He had to cover it.
he had
yeah,
to cover it.
Yeah.
That represents, and she says, taking that off represents a setting aside for Jesus of a merely earthly body. He's not setting aside his body. It's just the merely earthly body, and the taking on of a glorified body that matches his divinity.
You're talking about the veil that separated the people from the,
It could
From
be
the
that.
Torah.
That's a different
Yeah,
one.
different,
But there
but
was a
there's
veil
lots-
in the tomb.
In the
There was-
tomb,
in the
remember, we
tomb
were
after
talking
the
about that when the-
resurrection.
Yeah.
was it
I
on
don't know if that's
Sinai?
in John, but
Yeah.
there was
well,
a veil
But
in
it's
the.
tied, you're right, it's tied
Yeah.
back to, and there's probably a lot more
Yeah.
links.
yeah, we
So
had,
it'd be fun
we
to
had talked
explore
about
that.
it before.
Mhm.
Then Moses, when he came down for Sinai, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but it was then
Yep.
used in the temple. There was a
There was
Yeah,
veil
there.
and of course, the big tearing of the temple.
and the tearing of the
death, yeah.
veil
Oh my
when he,
gosh.
Yeah,
when he
that's
died,
really
yeah.
powerful. That's really powerful.
From top to
So
bottom.
the way Jesus died is a revelation to the centurion. Okay, that's not a sign. That was a revelation when he watched how Jesus died and he said, this man really was the Son of God.
yeah.
That's not something, not a lot of other people weren't sitting around there saying, oh, this is the Son of God. But that one man looked and said, oh my gosh. And this is just something I want to share with you guys. I thought it was really interesting. She points out that Greek in John's narrative uses 3 different words. So those of you who studied languages, to describe the scene at the tomb. So there's a form of Greek that is simple scene, that Mary Magdalene, when she first comes there and there's nobody there, just scene, like we see there's nobody in the room next door. Then there's Simon Peter who comes in and he sees and he recognizes that there's a greater significance to this than meets the eye, but he's not sure what it is.
Mhm.
But he says, oh my gosh. And then there is, if we say, sorry, Augustine, we're going to go with belief in a faith sense. There is the beloved disciple sees completely, still not fully understanding, but sees completely and intuits, and our intuition is apparently big here as in Revelation, the true meaning and penetrating to the core. And I think in some ways the beloved disciple is like the centurion. They say, oh my gosh, there's something here, it's real, and still not quite sure because he hasn't seen the risen Christ. But that, so those are the 3 different ways we can see. Does that
And-
make sense?
And that's also a bridge between the sign and the signified. I know that you're
Mhm.
saying that revelation is
Mhm.
the that which is signified. So, but if we're talking about how do I know something, so that intuition would then be a brand, or that would be a bridge between.
Yeah, that's how I understand it anyway.
Okay.
And Revelation makes the difference between experiencing the resurrected Christ or not, including when we're little and kids and we just think it. But you believe when you are 5 years old, you can still believe. The revelation can still reach you, even though intellectually, with all this fancy words, it's not there. But the thing is, and this is, she stresses, and this is where the mystery is and also the wonder, it always comes through material reality
Mhm.
for us as humans. That's why you could argue we needed the incarnation. support. I'm sure there was a big help for us because a lot of us couldn't. Otherwise, right?
I'm glad we have.
I think God comes to earth in all different ways and through many different faiths.
And he was
I
here
believe it, but
available all the way up to Christ. But God thought they need something more than that.
Something more. So, but it's always material, and that's where we experience the truly bodily risen Christ. We can experience in each other. That doesn't mean, think of somebody you really love. Okay, I think of somebody that many people love, and they're not there with us at our party or at our Bible study or something. They are still really and truly there, but we can still experience them because of our love for them.
Yeah.
And our parents and our dear friends who've died and our children who have died. Yep.
And I think there in no way is a diminishment if we say a spiritual experience
Mhm.
is occurs or can be described through emotionality or through thought,
Mhm.
right? Thinking about that person, being aware, trying remembering and deliberately recalling feelings that you had when you were with them. That's still a spiritual existence. And to your point, that materiality, you know, the cognition and the chemical reactions that cause this stuff, like that is a potent spirituality. It doesn't diminish it
Mhm.
just to say, well, that's emotions and thoughts.
Right,
No,
no,
that,
yeah,
yeah,
the whole
that's still,
package.
yeah, that's still a theological category of spiritual experience.
And on that very lovely note, I am so sorry, everyone. It is 10:11 and I have to go.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
the palms are waiting, but you'll notice I got green up there now.
I'm very glad.
Yeah.
And this, you guys, this is the last slide, and so, but this is E.E. Cummings, and if you need to go, Laura, that's okay.
Yeah.